Hello everyone, CivMD here. Welcome to part 3 of the Deity Guide for Civilization 5. Today we're going to focus on the honor tree and how to optimize combat, especially in the early game. Here's the list of things that we will talk about today. First of all, why somebody would choose honor as a starting policy tree rather than tradition or liberty. And then we'll talk about what is in an army and what are the best promotions. Then we will discuss individual policies in the honor policy tree and add a little bit of a tangent about great generals. Then we'll move on to the overall game plan for honor builds, a more detailed discussion regarding worker stealing, how to sow division amongst the AI, which target to prioritize in terms of initiating an attack, finally a little bit of advice regarding attacking city-states. The goal of this presentation is to understand what units and promotions are best for domination victories, understand the complicated but very effective build-up using the honor policy tree, and lastly, understanding AI civilization traits and how to plan a war. Before I begin, I will tell you a disclaimer that honor and piety as a starting tree is a very niche way to play. In most cases, tradition or liberty are considered more reliable choices. And again, honor is highly debated and rather polarizing in terms of people's opinions. But it is a tree that can be strictly superior to tradition or liberty if you are preparing for war from the very beginning of the game. This works for just a few number of civs that actually support this kind of playstyle. Note that the honor policy tree does not really offer any flexibility, and your only plan in the majority of the game is domination and taking over cities. But later on, a successful control of a large territory can help you achieve victory conditions other than domination. For example, if you eliminate 6 out of 8 civilizations from the game, the remaining 2 civilizations might not be able to compete with you in terms of culture output or money output, so you can win easily in a cultural or diplomatic victory win condition. So what does the honor policy tree offer? The honor policy tree is designed for raising military units. You do not focus on infrastructure or settlements. Your highly upgraded units are the infrastructure, and then you simply acquire the cities and infrastructure that other civilizations have built. You are essentially playing as a barbarian camp. Now, is the honor policy tree viable for all civilizations? Absolutely not. Honor is strictly inferior than liberty or tradition for most civilizations, but it is strictly superior for certain select civilizations. The best civilizations for honor meet the 2 following conditions. First, you have an outstanding bonus to early warmongering or early game production, and you would like to get the war game going on as soon as possible. And second, you don't have an inherent bonus to experience gain or great general production, so some help from the honor policy tree is actually helpful. Examples of good honor civilizations include the Huns, Zulu, Germany, and the Songhai. The Huns are the easiest honor civilization you will play because they have an early production bonus and also a very strong and fast range unit which becomes near unbeatable when you get logistics and range. The free Great Generals is also very helpful, and it'll let you conquer your first target with fewer units. The Zulu is also a very easy honor civilization. You have a very strong melee unit, but you don't have bonuses in terms of range units, so the Great Generals and the even faster experience gained from the policy tree is very helpful. The Germans essentially have a unique production bonus because you can get extra units for free from clearing barbarian camps. Because you are encouraged to seek out battles, you can actually turn these free units into part of your regular army that you can use to conquer the AI. Last but not least, the Songhai are the opposite of the Germans. You don't have a unit production bonus, but you have a very strong gold bonus. So there is no upper limit in terms of how many units you can have, and you can upgrade whatever you want as you go along the way. Now let's talk about what goes in an army. A typical brigade consists of 6 to 8 ranged units and 1 to 2 melee units. These ranged units are either standard ranged units using a bow or a siege unit like trebuchets or cannons. The melee units can be either infantry units or mounted units. And multiple brigades become an entire army. The more units you have, the better. but it's especially the ranged units that are most helpful in terms of eliminating enemy units and also whittling down the city defenses. Remember the 4 horsemen of Civ Fight domination that we discussed during the part 2 video for Liberty. These are composite bowmen, crossbows, cannons, and artillery. These 4 units are the units that have enough ranged power in their era to actually deal with the deity AI. Composite bowmen and crossbows, also known as CB and XBs to be abbreviated, are the standard ranged units with a range of 2, and they can move and shoot. This contrasts with the siege units require 1 turn to charge. The artillery is a lot more impactful compared to the cannon because it has a range of 3, so not only you can stay out of enemy city bombardment range, you can fit more units in a given area, so it ultimately increases firepower even more. Rocket artillery and bombers are a special mention, but I don't like to include them in the 4 horsemen group. If you're attempting to win by domination, those units arrive a little too late to be effective. Now, why do you want to get these ranged units early? It's because you want to get promotions. This is a Zulu crossbow that essentially has gotten every single promotion possible. Some of the earlier promotions include Accuracy 1, 2, and 3, which increases damage output in open terrain, and Barrage 1, 2, and 3, which increases damage output in rough terrain. Finishing either Accuracy or Barrage unlocks the most powerful promotions in the game, which are Logistics, which allows your unit to attack twice in the same turn, and Range, which gives you +1 range to your particular ranged unit. So instead of having a range of 2, if you get all these promotions, this early era unit now has a range of 3, plus 45% combat strength from finishing Accuracy or Barrage, plus it can attack twice. So it's essentially a 2.9 times stronger unit. This makes it comparable to artillery. And these ranged units are very good because the enemy cannot retaliate against them very easily. The point of taking the honor policy tree is to get these all-powerful promoted ranged units as quickly as possible. Some other relevant early promotions include Scouting 1 and 2, which are available on scouts and mountain units. These give you increased sight, which helps to plan forward how to launch an attack against the enemy. Also, Medic 1 and 2 is very important. These are available on infantry unit as well as mounted units, and this gives you faster healing speed for all adjacent units. This is very good because it eliminates the downtime between pushes when you inevitably have to stop and allow your units to recover HP. Note that both the scouting and the medic improvements are available for mounted units, so you can compress the rolls if you have a few mounted units with a lot of promotions. Now let's talk about the honor policy tree itself. The typical order that people adopt honor policies are from left to right. The honor opener first, and then warrior code, and then military tradition. Now you go to the right to get discipline and military caste, and lastly, the professional army policy that unlocks the honor finisher. Let's talk about the honor opener first. This gives you culture from barbarian kills. People think this is a lot of culture and sometimes argue that you should go for this first to supplement your culture game for tradition and liberty games, but oftentimes you are simply not going to have that many barbarians to make this worth it. So I highly advise against mixing tradition or liberty with honor. The whole point of the honor opener is to reward you for building more units and to encourage you to raise them. This does not eliminate the need to build monuments in your cities. The next policy is warrior code. This gives you faster melee unit production, but that's not the real benefit. The real benefit is the free great general and also faster great general production. I'm going to go on a quick tangent about great generals here. There are 3 main uses for great generals in Civ 5. The first is to add combat bonuses to all units within 2 hexes from the great general, but also it helps you build a citadel, which triggers a quick border expansion, also known as a culture bomb, and you can use this to claim a luxury or bonus resource outside your city's 3-tile radius. But more importantly, the best use of the Great General is building a citadel to cut into enemy territory. which is especially useful when you're fighting an enemy with the Great Wall Wonder. The Great Wall Wonder is especially annoying to deal with because it slows down all of your unit's movement, but it only happens in enemy territory. When you use up a Great General to flip the ownership of a tile, then the Great Wall's effects no longer apply and your units can move normally. In this image example, I even used up 3 Great Generals to cut into Honolulu, which was very heavily defended, and thanks for doing all of that, I'm able to move my artillery freely in and take the city. And an obligatory meme to demonstrate the benefits of the Great General here. With that out of the way, let's go through the rest of the honor policy tree. The military tradition policy is where the fun begins. The 50% faster experience gain might not appear to be a lot, but this helps you get the coveted logistics and range promotions sooner, anywhere between 30 to 50 turns, which is an entire era. Next is discipline. Your army shouldn't have that many melee units, but it's important to not let them die because only melee units can directly take cities. Ranged units can only damage the city, but cannot actually take the city. So this policy helps with the longevity of your melee units. The next is military caste. This is a very good policy because if you place any military unit in your own cities or your conquer cities, you're going to get +1 happiness and +2 culture. So it's like having a free monument on top of the monument it already has. So this helps you keep the cities that you have conquered and also eliminates the need to invest in culture buildings or rider skills at all, while still having a good culture output just by having many units. The best way to utilize this though is to just make a bunch of scouts and station them in each of your cities. Lastly, the best part of the honor policy tree is this last policy and the finisher. Professional army decreases the cost of upgrading units by 33%. The more units you have, the more money you need to spend, but if you cut this cost, you don't have to worry as much about going bankrupt. Furthermore, the money you have saved through this can be funded into buying city-state favors. And if you ally with a city-state that is nearby an opponent, you can make the domination game much easier. The finisher goes along really nicely with professional army because this gives you gold equal to the combat strength of killed enemy units. It doesn't matter if it's a barbarian or a civ, city, state, it doesn't matter. This is really strong, especially if you are going on constant warfare, and even in the early game, you can get up to 50 gold per turn. And the money you get here gets funneled back into upgrades for your army, which is made cheaper through the professional army policy. Lastly, the best part of the honor policy tree is this last policy and the finisher. Professional army decreased the cost of upgrading your units by 33%. The more units that you have, the more money you need to spend, but if you cut this cost, you don't have to worry as much about going bankrupt. Furthermore, the money you have saved through this can be funded into buying city-state favors, and you ally with a city-state that is nearby an opponent to make domination games much easier. The finisher goes along really well with professional army because this gives you gold equal to the combat strength of any killed unit. It doesn't matter if it's a barbarian, a civ, or a city-state unit. This is really strong, especially if you're going on constant warfare, and even in the early game, you can get up to 50 gold per turn. And the money you get here gets funneled back into upgrades for your army, which is made cheaper through the professional army policy. Now let's talk about the overall game plan for Honor. You're essentially playing a one-city challenge. You don't really build settlers when you're playing with Honor, and you simply take other people's settlements. But in many situations, settling one additional satellite city can be preferable. But you have to be careful because you will be wasting your precious early 12 to 15 turns that you're not building a military unit. You're also not making builders. You're going to steal all of them too. You only build the bare essential infrastructures in your capital like monument and library, and otherwise you just churn out archers and composite archers. And most importantly, you never let your units die. Remember that your units are the infrastructure that the honor policy tree allows you to have. Furthermore, don't forget about culture. You want to try to finish the honor policy tree as soon as possible for the cheaper upgrades and gold on kill. The build order for honor gameplay is a bit complicated, but I will go through this step by step. In the capital, the order is Scout, Monument, Archer, Shrine, a Settler, Caravan, and then as many archers as possible, and then Granary and Library. Scouts are again mandatory as usual. In addition to ancient ruins, the important missions are to scout out the enemy city and also to pick up fights with barbarians a little bit, so you can get to the Scout 1 promotion for a +1 sight. An early monument is still mandatory. Typically, the culture from fighting barbarians aren't enough. One starting archer is very important right after the monument because you want to start getting EXP and culture right away. Then it's highly recommended to build a shrine. You can omit this if your starting location doesn't have a good source of culture from a pantheon, but let's say if you have any horses nearby, you want to build a shrine just to get God Up the Open Sky for +1 culture for pastures. And then, the most important decision is whether you go for an additional settler after this. Some of the decisions why you might have to build one settler is that the nearest AI city might be more than 10 hexes away from your capital, so you might have to build a city closer to the enemy border so that you can even send a caravan for extra science in the first place. And also, if you have an extra city that has a monument inside, you can go through the honor policy tree quickly. And also, if you have an extra city with a granary, you can help your capital's growth if you send your second caravan from the satellite city into your capital. Some of the downsides of building a settler is that this is another 10 to 15 turns that you're not producing archers. And if you settle poorly, that extra city might not contribute to food or production and just give you extra unhappiness. And having an extra city also increases your national college production costs. And most importantly, the chances are you can still send the internal trade route to boost food in your capital city if any of your newly conquered cities are within 10 hexes and still has a granary. And once you have built your settler or not, then you immediately build the caravan. This is your main source of science. When you send a caravan to an AI city, you are essentially starting a 30-turn timer where you prepare all of your units for the actual attack. If you're attacking an AI when a trade route with them is still operating, the caravan unit is destroyed and you might have to build another one from scratch, but sometimes you can just ignore the timer and you might have to do the attack when the timing is correct. Ideally, if you have 2 neighbors that you can choose from, you can send the caravan to the one that you're not going to attack first. Now you don't have to worry about the caravan being destroyed. Afterwards, you build as many archers as possible before you unlock composite bowmen. The goal is to upgrade all of them to composite bowmen as soon as they are unlocked, and you should chop woods to produce as many archers as possible quickly at this stage. The initial attack should be launched with at least 6 composite bowmen, 1 warrior ideally with the medic promotion, and 1 to 2 scouts ideally with the scouting promotion. Having lots of scouts are probably okay because you can use them as cannon fodder while you protect your bowmen. And the initial attack should be ready by turn 60 on standard speed at the latest. Once you have started attacking your first victim, that is when you build a granary and library. Unless you have a need for specific units like the battering ram, you should tech towards philosophy for the National College, and this will be built quickly because you have only 1 or 2 cities. And you may opt to build more composite bowmen from scratch if necessary. As you continue to conquer, every city that you conquer will have their population cut in half, and it will go through 10 turns of resistance. Afterwards, you will have to decide whether your conquered cities should stay as a puppet or properly annexed. Here's a rule of thumb. Puppeted cities should be the default because you don't experience unhappiness penalties this way. And once the resistance period is over, you'll start getting 100% of the gold yields and at least 75% of the science and culture yields of the city. But later on, you should annex cities that have high production levels, especially well-developed ones that used to be habitals. This way, you can have more cities contributing to unit production, and perhaps is the cities that can contribute to unit production because of their high production levels that are worth the unhappiness. And here's the overall tech order for honor builds. You go for archery first, and then pottery, then animal husbandry, and then mining. If you're playing as the Huns and you want to know where horses are, then you can go for animal husbandry first, and then archery second, and pottery third. But note that the Hunnic horse archers, for some reason, do not require horses, so you don't have to go for animal husbandry first either way. Then, regardless of what luxury resource you have, you drive straight into construction. The goal is to use your caravan to boost your science, and then make as many archers as possible and try to get composite bowmen as soon as possible. So you don't need the libraries, so that is omitted. And once you have unlocked the composite bowman, then you get the library and also tech towards philosophy or national college. And then you go towards the currency, engineering, and then machinery for crossbows. So to summarize, you're using a caravan as sort of a science building to get composite bowmen quickly, and then you try to build a national college quickly to get to crossbows. And oftentimes the crossbows will carry you towards the end of the game, but oftentimes it's not enough. So what you do in this case is to get cannons and artillery. After machinery, then you should go for education for universities, and then go towards chemistry for cannons, and then you continue to tech towards military science and fertilizer. But you are timing the Oxford University to get a free tech to instantly unlock dynamites for artillery. The Oxford University, as you may well know, is the national college equivalent but for universities, and its effect is to give you one free technology. In a domination game, the best use for this free technology is for unlocking artillery 20 turns earlier than you should. Afterwards, you go towards industrialization to unlock factories, and you build 3 factories to unlock ideologies. So that was the overall game plan for honor builds, but really this tech tree steps apply for any domination victories using tradition or liberty even. So we talked a lot about what we need to do for our build order, but equally important is to know your opponents. Sun Tzu once famously said, and God, I'm going to butcher this, but it's 知彼知己,百战不殆, which translates into know the enemy and know yourself, and you will never be imperiled in 100 battles. So now we're going to talk about how to steal workers from your neighbors, how to sow division amongst your opponents, how to choose your first victim for an attack, and how to attack city-states. The goal in the ancient era is to bully your opponents by worker stealing and capturing their settlers. And the goal is not to take over cities here. You just don't have the military power yet. And note that your starting warrior is the best option for stealing workers, and it can probably survive a city bombardment and 1 enemy warrior attack. Here's an example. I'm playing as the Songhai, and I see a worker in a Byzantine city. I get a little bit closer, but it turns out there's 2 warriors, so I'm probably not going to survive if I want to attack now, so I wait a little bit, and 2 turns later, the warriors move, and now there's an unprotected worker and only 1 warrior in sight. I make the attack, survive the city bombardment and the warrior attack, and then run away. I already checked that my escape route is clear and it was a flat line, so I'm able to travel outside of city bombardment range in 1 turn. And that's how you do a worker steal. Do note that certain civilizations make worker stealing a lot more of a challenge. The Aztecs and the Incans have faster moving speeds in jungle and hills respectively, so your warrior might survive the hit, but it might not be able to run away fast enough with the captured worker, and your opponent's warrior will catch up to you and kill your warrior and take the worker back. And civilizations like the Huns and Zulu are also problems because after you do the worker steal, you want to make temporary peace because you want to make peace to prepare your real attack in secret. And certain civilizations have high boldness values for their personality traits and also have low forgiveness values. So they are less likely to make peace after you attack them. And if you want to check the actual values for AI traits, this is the URL. Now let's talk about sowing division. In Deity gameplay, regardless of which victory condition you're going for, tricking AI civs into fighting each other is essential. And this is for 2 reasons. First, it decreases the number of enemy units you have to kill before you reach the city center. and you want to preserve the strength of your composite bowman army as much as possible. And any loss in the overall range strength of your army makes domination a lot more difficult. The other reason is that if two civilizations fight each other and then you join in, it decreases the chance that you will be attacked from another neighbor because you are essentially fighting a joint war. So this is safer, even if you are accumulating a lot of warmonger points. By the way, if you hover over a city while you're attacking, it'll show you how much warmongering points you'll accumulate by taking that city. And let me show you an example of an international relationship might look like in a diagram. Let's say there's you in green, and then Assyria, Mongolia, and Korea. And let's say you want to attack Assyria first because they appear to be an easier target. Then what you can do here is to bribe Assyria to attack Mongolia, and then you backstab them. Mongolia will like you for this, so now you can pay them to attack Korea for cheap. Meanwhile, you finish Assyria and then backstab the Mongols as well. You finish them off, then you're only left with Korea, and with your highly promoted army, you conquer them as well. And generally, it's best to attack the civilization you just bribed, because now you don't have to pay the gold per turn agreements once the war is declared. But it's also reasonable to bribe another civilization to declare a joint war. And although you will have to continue to pay the bribe, you'll likely accumulate less warmongering points this way. And once you finish off one of your target civilizations completely, you don't have to pay the gold per turn bribe anymore because that target civilization is gone. So you can do the example I just showed you just now, but the alternative is to ask Mongolia to attack Assyria. Then you attack Assyria together, and while that's going on, you bribe Mongolia to attack Korea as well. In the midst of the chaos, you finish up Assyria, and then Mongolia easily gets knocked out because they're fighting a war on two fronts, and with you, it's actually 3 fronts. So it gets incredibly easy, and then you finish off Korea as well. So the most important decision here is to choose the right civilization to bribe. You have to decide which civilization you're going to attack first. Sometimes the choice is obvious because there's only one civilization right next to you, but sometimes you have to make a decision between 2 or 3 opponents. So it's important to know the matches of different civilizations against key range units like the composite bowmen and crossbows. If a civilization is powerful in the early game and does well against composite bowmen rushes, it's likely best to make sure you have crossbows before attacking. If a civilization, on the other hand, is a very good mid-game and can fend off the crossbows easily, it makes most sense to try to eliminate them early with composites or try to get artillery early. And lastly, if a civilization has a very good late game, you also want to eliminate early, whatever the cost. You can try to get crossbows and artillery quickly to finish them off, but ideally you want to finish them off with composite bowmen. And let's go over each of these categories. Some of the classical era threats include the Zulu and Iroquois, which both have a very strong early game melee unit, which does not require any resources, so they can spam them with no restrictions. Especially the Imp unit can kill a composite bowman in 1 hit. The Huns, Mongols, and the Danes are some of the civilizations also with a high offensive unit production value, so they are just simply going to have a lot of units from the very early game. And lastly, the Shoshone and Babylonians have an early game defensive bonus, so the composite bowmen deal 2 little damage to the units or cities, respectively. If you unlock crossbows early enough, though, they're not as much of a threat. And here are some of the medieval era threats. The Americans give you the most headache because Minutemen are very strong and they ignore movement costs, so your crossbows are always in danger of being attacked. Even if they are, let's say, in the jungles or on hills, you're going to need a strong frontline unit to provide cover, or you're just going to have to deal with them as quickly as possible. The Siamese have the Nurse One's elephants, which are also incredibly strong and also doesn't require resources, and they can spam those units as much as possible. And also because it's actually a Lancer unit, your horsemen and knights can't provide cover either. And lastly, the English and Koreans have a very strong range unit in the medieval era, so they give you a lot of trouble when you're trying to attack with your own crossbows. And finally, here are the late game nightmares. if you take too long to defeat these civilizations, or if they are your last opponents, sometimes you might have to give up and pivot to another victory condition. Your best chance is to hope that they are right next to you and you can nip them in the bud as the game begins. The French, Polynesians, Iroquois, and Zulu are some of the civilizations that are very prolific white builders. They will create so many new cities that are decently populated and well defended, and it will take too much time to reach their capital, and also they will just spawn so many units. The Swedish and Greeks are very good at keeping lots of city-state allies, so their defense plan is actually borrowing military help from city-states. And it's especially troublesome when your capital is relatively not guarded, but there is a city-state right next to you that's allied with your enemy. And lastly, the Shoshone and Russians have a strong cavalry replacement that can damage your artillery badly. It only gets worse as time goes. You can deal with this with having more quantity of units though. And I'm going to talk about one more thing in this video, which is a final quick mention about how to attack city-states. Attacking city-states have multiple benefits because you can train your units, and you can also conquer them and get extra money and sell it back to another civilization. So it makes sense to practice your attack on a city-state before you go on your full attack against your real first enemy. And it's best to declare war on a city-state early. Ideally, you want to do this before any of the civilizations declare protection or even ally with them. And if you do manage to take over the city-state, the point is not to keep the city and try to integrate it, but really to sell it to a different civilization. And for example, I just took over Kathmandu, but the Simons tend to really like liberating city-states, so they are planning to pay me a total of essentially 30 gold per turn if you add up all of the things that they're trying to give me, just so that they can get this 2-population city. And then you can channel this money towards upgrading units. It takes 80 gold to go from an archer to a composite bow, and 100 gold from a composite bow to a crossbow. And that's it. And I will link the sample gameplay video for the honor policy tree right here. And thanks for watching.